They say the eyes are the windows to the soul, but what if mirrors are the windows to something else? Throughout history, mirrors have been feared, not just as reflective surfaces, but as portals. In many ancient cultures, mirrors were covered during times of death, lest they trap a passing spirit. Some believed that if you stared long enough, something would eventually stare back. And in 1954, something did. The earliest known sighting of what would come to be known as the Smiling Stranger happened in a quiet town in southern Germany. The witness? A 14-year-old boy named Elias Becker. According to a police report filed by his parents, Elias had entered the bathroom one night to wash his face. His parents described hearing a blood-curdling scream, followed by the sound of breaking glass. When they burst in, they found Elias on the floor, sobbing and pointing toward the mirror. But the mirror was empty, just shards of glass and cold air. Elias kept repeating the same thing. He was smiling. He was smiling. He was right there. When pressed for details, the boy said the man had no hair, wore a black suit that shimmered like water, and smiled so widely it looked like his face might split. Most disturbingly, Elias insisted that the man was not standing behind him, but inside the mirror, staring, smiling, waiting. Within a week, Elias stopped speaking altogether. He was institutionalized for severe catatonia and over time faded into silence. Doctors believed he had suffered a psychotic break. But then came the drawings. Elias would spend hours sketching the same figure over and over again. A tall man with a stretched grin, wide-set eyes, and no reflection of light in them. Always standing behind the viewer, never blinking. Was it a hallucination? A case of childhood trauma? Or had Elias seen something none of us were ever meant to? In the winter of 1973, at a small, aging hotel in the heart of Edinburgh, something strange happened in room 204. The guest was a middle-aged businessman, quiet, reserved. He checked in alone, paid in cash, and spoke little to anyone. On his second night, he asked the receptionist for duct tape in a towel. When asked why, he simply smiled and said, "I need to block out the mirror." The next morning, the housekeeper entered to clean the room, and what she found would haunt her for the rest of her life. The man was lying on the bed, stiff, cold, his face frozen in a grimace of raw terror. His eyes were still wide open, as if the last thing he saw had defied understanding. But it wasn't the corpse that unsettled the staff. It was what he'd left behind. In the bathroom, taped to the fogged-over mirror, was a note. Written in shaking, uneven letters, it read, "He smiled every night." I covered the glass. He waited. "Tonight I forgot." There were no signs of trauma, no drugs or alcohol in his system. The coroner listed the cause of death as sudden cardiac arrest. But unofficially, no one could explain the look on his face. Later, the housekeeper remembered something else. The day before, she'd removed a towel that was taped across the bathroom mirror. She thought it was part of the guest's laundry and took it down. He must have taped it back up, but not well enough. That night, the man faced his reflection for the first time in days, and whatever he had been trying to keep out was finally let in. The question isn't whether the man died of fright. The question is, what did he see smiling back at him? The smiling stranger isn't just an urban myth. In psychiatric clinics around the world, his face, his twisted, inhuman grin, has appeared in places you'd least expect. On the pages of sketchbooks, in therapy journals, in whispered accounts from patients who'd never met, yet described him the same way. In the mid-1990s, a psychiatric research team in Kyoto, Japan, conducted a study on mirror-induced psychosis. 12 patients, each diagnosed with severe visual hallucinations, were asked to spend 5 minutes a day looking at their reflection in isolation. Within a week, 10 of them reported seeing a smiling man appear behind them. When asked to draw what they saw, 9 of the 10 sketches were eerily similar. Tall, bald, pale skin, wide grin, black suit, eyes spaced unnaturally far apart. None of the patients had contact with one another. No media exposure, no way to influence each other's accounts. Even more disturbing, some began reporting the man outside of the mirror, in corners, in windows, in dreams. One patient, a middle-aged school teacher, wrote in her notebook, "He watches from the glass, but he's learning how to step through. This was not the first time clinicians had encountered the image. A 1982 case in New York involved a man who smashed every mirror in his apartment, claiming he was being hunted through reflections. He insisted that the smiling man wasn't a hallucination, but a thing that lives in mirrored spaces. Doctors dismissed his words as metaphor, but when his body was found weeks later, facing a broken shard of mirror, eyes wide in horror, it felt less like poetry and more like prophecy. If this is mass delusion, how can so many describe the same man? And if it isn't, then maybe he isn't a creation of our minds. Maybe our minds are just how he enters. They say nothing good happens after 3 a.m. Clara Yates never believed in superstition. She was practical, a civil engineer, living alone in a quiet Melbourne apartment, rational to a fault, until the night she woke up at 3:14 a.m. to a sound she couldn't explain. It was a soft, repetitive tapping, like fingernails on glass. She sat up, confused, still half asleep. The room was dark, save for the red glow of her alarm clock. That's when she looked at the mirror. The full-length mirror beside her bed was foggy, as if someone had breathed on it. Strange considering she hadn't touched it in hours, and in the mist a shape was forming. A figure, tall, motionless. As her eyes adjusted, the image sharpened. A man, pale, bald, wearing a tight, dark suit, standing impossibly close behind her reflection, and smiling. But when she turned, nothing. The room was empty. Her breath caught. She looked back at the mirror. The grin was still there, frozen, staring at her, as if the man had never left, only retreated behind the glass. Clara didn't sleep the rest of that night. The next morning, she threw the mirror away, hauled it down the stairs herself, left it in the alley. But something strange happened after that. She began to feel watched, not constantly, just when passing windows, black TV screens, or the faint reflection in a coffee spoon. That grin, once burned into her memory, now seemed to hover just beneath every surface. She tried to forget, told herself it was stress, imagination, lack of sleep. But each night, as she passed the blank wall where the mirror once stood, she felt like something was missing, not the mirror, the man inside it, and she began to wonder, did she throw the mirror out, or did she just set him free? By now, we might be tempted to dismiss the smiling stranger as nothing more than urban folklore, an echo chamber of internet threads, whispered bedtime stories, or the shared hallucinations of vulnerable minds. But that explanation grows weaker with each new encounter. In 2010, a woman in Buenos Aires reported seeing a man smiling at her through the reflection of a subway train window. She turned around. No one was there. Days later, she began seeing the same face in puddles, glass doors, even in the gloss of a magazine cover. Eventually, she checked herself into a hospital, claiming she could no longer trust any reflective surface. The attending psychiatrist, initially skeptical, later reported seeing a second reflection in the woman's hospital mirror. He never returned to work. This isn't an isolated case. Reports from different countries, cultures, and languages all describe the same entity. Hairless, tall, wearing a suit that looks wet or metallic, and always that smile. Researchers have started to explore a more disturbing possibility. What if the smiling stranger isn't a ghost or alien or hallucination? What if he's something else entirely? A kind of non-physical observer intelligence that lives within our perception. He doesn't exist in the world around us. He exists in the act of looking itself. Mirrors, after all, don't just reflect light, they reflect attention. And maybe, just maybe, that attention goes both ways. The moment you look, he becomes aware of you. The moment you recognize him, he learns your shape. And the moment you fear him, he finds a way in. Maybe that's why those who ignore him survive, and those who try to understand him don't. So ask yourself this: if you're looking at your reflection right now, are you alone, or has something just become aware of you? You've heard the stories, you've followed the sightings, you've seen the pattern. Now you're probably wondering, what's the truth? Is the smiling stranger real? We may never know for sure, but maybe that's the point. He thrives in the uncertainty, in the act of questioning. He doesn't need your belief. He needs your attention. Because the moment you acknowledge him, the moment your fear gives him form, that's when he starts to smile. So tonight, when you're brushing your teeth or passing by a darkened window, look closely, but not too long. Glance, but don't stare. Check the corners, the shadows behind you, the background of your reflection. And if you see a second figure, taller than you remember, smiling just a bit too wide, standing just a bit too still, don't turn around, don't speak, and for your own sake, don't smile back. Because what if all it takes is that one moment, one connection, one glance too long, one smile too many, and suddenly, you're the one in the mirror, watching, waiting, smiling.